You take your heart and you stick it on the field and it stays there. So a piece of you dies every time you leave. I don't think a coach can win games. I think a coach can actually lose games by the way you behave.
Hello and welcome back to the Better Human Podcast, a podcast about making humans better humans and demystifying the world of relationships, communication, entrepreneurship for your better life. Today we are joined by the one and only, the head coach of the Israeli rugby team, Kevin Musikanth, the head coach, as I mentioned, and director of the Rugby Union. Kevin's achievements speak for themselves, from winning prestigious Varsity Cup Tournament in 2014 to securing a game that has been labeled as one of the greatest rugby comebacks of all time. Kevin has proven time and again how his passion and hard work can lead to ultimate success in sportsmanship. He's a perfect example of finding your passion and turning that into your profession. Kevin loves learning new skills, reading, and every once in a while he'll pick up that guitar, he'll strum a long way, and sing a song any on day. Let's start the conversation by jumping right on into the impact session. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a great honor and privilege.
You know, I've given you this big sort of intro. That being said, where do you want to start today? Do you want to maybe give the audience a little bit of a quick overview of, you know, who are you, what are you doing, where you're going?
I was born in a tiny little seaside resort called Muizenberg in Cape Town. Beautiful South Peninsula suburb. Pretty much where the warm Indian Ocean meets the cooler Atlantic Ocean. So, you know, growing up there, sort of away from everything, away from the big towns and the big city of Cape Town. We sort of go to the big city and then go back to that sleepy little hollow. And that pretty much is the way I operate. You know, I love let's call it the bright lights of sort of high level rugby and that pressure, but also that downtown walk on the beach, guitar, that type of thing, just to get away from it and to recheck everything.
Yeah, so I mean, let's go there for a sec. The role you're in is intense, right? I mean, you're head of a rugby team. It's an intense sport. It's competitive. You know, how important is it for you to take that time to yourself? We'll call it decompress time.
I think you learn. It's you learn that it's important. You know, you kind of as you going through your coaching career or any sports career, you grind your teeth down until they're no more. There are no more teeth to grind. So you kind of learn that if you don't take those sort of downtime and those little walks and this quietness, you're going to go crazy. You can't be coaching sport for longer than 5 years if you don't realize that you have to take time out and that everything's not really about winning and losing all the time. I have to remind myself often. I think the people around you help you with that, but you learn it pretty quickly. There's no greater lessons than losing games or losing competitions or losing a final. I think one of my first seasons, I was coaching an under-21 team in Claremont, a club called Villages, very proud, second oldest club in South Africa. And I think I was the coach, we lost 10 games in a row or something ridiculous. You learn that it's kind of, you tell yourself it's just a game.
Right. Sometimes easier said than done, though, right? And I
Absolutely.
mean, the game, you know, we could replace for other people. You know, people have businesses, people have, you know, other sort of passions and commitments, and it's hard to not be all in on some of this stuff.
Well, I think when you're a coach, you know you're a leader, so you realize that you actually cannot control what's happening to you. You can just control the way you respond to what's happening to you. And you learn that quickly because everybody's kind of looking to you to lead them out of a mess. And if you're a mess yourself, which often sportsmen and coaches are, but they learn to be good salesmen and good actors to give people their best, because that's what they need from you.
I mean, is that fair to say that, you know, there are times that, you know, you are struggling on the inside and your role is to be coach, your role is to be leader, and you have to, the curtain open, the show must go on, and you must come on with a brave face. You must show certainty, you must show direction and confidence. Is that true? Is that fair?
For sure. It's a practiced skill. I do think certain things you are born with. There is that part of it as well. But it is a practice skill. You learn that the team feeds off your composure. There's nothing worse than a team that's under pressure and the coach is just going crazy, and the team can see that and just adds to the pressure. But you know, you're kind of going crazy inside. You learn to be composed.
Very cool. So what, I mean, do you have a mantra? Do you have tools, techniques that you use, breathing that help you remain calm under that type of pressure?
I think it's just seeing a similar movie that you've seen before, and you kind of know that you know what the ending's going to be. It's kind of when you're watching a really, really good movie, you notice certain things happen and they repeat themselves. You know, this is just a little speed bump. Kind of, it's going to get better. You just have to ride it out, and the only thing you can do, kind of as a coach, is to ruin it. I don't think a coach can win games. I think a coach can actually lose games by the way you behave.
I mean, that's so true for, I think, all aspects of life, specifically as leadership, you know, whether you're leading a team, coaching a team, or a business, or a family, or a community, or whatnot. So on that note, this is a great question, or a great way for us to segue into this question, which is, what is the one thing you wish you had known when you began your career?
I think you realize that careers are based on winning and losing, but even though your career's based on that, it actually is just a game. Because if you won every single game, you wouldn't know what it was like to feel like a winner. You have to know what it's like to lose. So once you realize that it's just a game, you realize there's more to life, and it takes, I reckon, it takes 5 years to realize that.
Yeah.
You got to get over it.
Yeah. You know, you just said something that's really important, to lose, and sports is one of those ways that we do so. And I mean, if you look at what the parent strategies have been over the last, call it, couple decades, they've removed the winning or losing.
I think it's very valuable to learn to lose, because in losing, there's lessons. So ultimately, learning to lose is the most important part. I'm not sure I agree with the idea of this non-competitive idea, because I think the world is competitive. I think life is just this giant competition. So if you're in a situation where you're never learning to lose and you're never learning to compete, I don't think you're developing correctly. Obviously, as a really young kid, you've got to, there are different ways, different mechanics, but certainly the last thing you want is a coach to sort of stand up in front of a team and say, it's okay. It's all right, guys. You can lose today. I'll be really happy about that.
Well, I mean, there's these high performance coaches that, like, you guys hire to come in and just help your teams think in a sort of more optimistic, positive, neutral sort of way, right? How important is mindset to the success of sports and winning?
I think it's everything.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference. I mean, how does a certain golfer or tennis player remain number one in the world for such a long period of time, or in the top 3 in the world? If you really think about it, millions and millions of these sportsmen, and this one guy that has the same skill set, and he hits a shot not even as good as somebody else, or this team, how do they keep winning? It's all in the mind. The talent is very, very similar at the highest level.
But I'm curious on that, which is, so what do you do with your team when it comes down to coaching and helping them with mindsets?
Actually, I have this philosophy that you sort of really work them hard at the beginning, not in competition. So it's kind of worse. Practices are worse than games. You really, to make that team is sort of everything. You sort of teach them all to fail when it doesn't really count, because you only get one shot at a league, or at a promotion, or at a competition. So you only kind of get one shot there. So making your practices really tough, and your preparation really tough. That's how you condition your guys to be really hardened when it comes down to the nitty gritty. You don't get a second chance at a final.
All right, so let's jump back into my next question, which is all about, they say some of our greatest lessons come from our biggest failures. So what was one of your biggest failures, and how's that landed for you as a lesson?
I think the one thing in life that's finite to you, I suppose as a leader as well, or a business owner, but as a coach, you become very philosophical. You always have to have these little anecdotes in coaching your team. But the one thing that's finite is time. You can never really get it back. Thankfully my parents are still alive, but I think back and I think of all the advice that my father gave me, and all the time that I knew better, like most kids. And I think the greatest failure is actually not listening enough to my dad, when growing up. Not that I was a terrible kid, just I should have listened a little bit more. And getting more mature in life, you realize I should have listened to my dad when he was in his 30s. I'm now in my 40s, and I should have listened to my dad when he was in his 40s and his 50s. So I actually think that's the greatest failure. And I think kids today perhaps maybe fail more at that than I did or we did, let's say.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think in some cases we grew up in a time where, we didn't listen, but you still listened, because if you didn't listen, there was consequence, right? You got what's it? You got what's the word? Cop. You got
Clapped.
clapped. Clapped is the word. Cop is the head. Clapped is the word. So which is getting hit in the head, right? So on that note, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, you're always learning, you're always evolving. What's next in your world? Something that's going to make you curious. What's the next thing you're going for?
I think we've got a huge challenge with Israeli rugby. That's my current position as director of the union, and coach of the national teams. It's a sort of 60th mid table in world rankings. There's about 140 countries that play rugby, and we're 60th. And the next thing is to become relevant, a relevant rugby playing country, for people to identify it as a country where you can play rugby. And slowly but surely we're chipping away at that. And that's the next biggest thing, I would say, for me, to be involved in something like that, to be able to make a difference at that sort of level, I think is incredible. Be part of a great story.
Yeah. How's rugby being received out in Israel?
It's not the most popular sport in the country, but ironically, it's the national team that has the highest world ranking. So ironically, it's probably the sport that could most likely get to a World Cup. It's funny when you sort of put bite-sized chunks into it. It's like you just need to get into the top 30 to really have a chance of being in the World Cup. And I say it's tough to get to the top 30, but we're kind of 57th, so we're closer to being in the World Cup than not. And it's trying to change that mindset. There's a famous, you probably know this, in 1995, Japan lost to New Zealand by 145 points. And sort of, fast forward 12 years, they're beating South Africa, and then another few years and they're beating Ireland at a World Cup, making a quarterfinal. It's just, these stories make us believe that we can do things.
Right. So what do you think you're up against? I mean, not with solid the sport itself, but what do you think you're going to battle against with your team in order to get them there? Are you going to be battling with skill, capability, mindsets? I mean, what are the hurdles or the obstacles you're predicting with your team?
I think it's platform, and that's where coaching and leadership comes in. But fortunately, we've got great leadership at the moment. We've got guys that really feel that something is possible, and ultimately that's all you want. You want your players to believe that you, as a coach and the leadership of the federation, believe that things are possible, not sort of put those barriers and limitations. All a rock star needs is a stage, and then the rock star comes out. So I think the greatest obstacle is creating those platforms for teams, more games, more opportunities for our players to shine. That's an obstacle, because the harder part is creating the platform. The easier part is getting potential to shine.
What is your pivotal moment in your sporting career?
I think it was making the change. I went from a TV competition where this unbelievable fairy tale, we really prepared well for that moment, but at the same time, there was a lot of fortune that went into it. Towards the end, it's a very famous rugby story that happened way back in 2014. But at the same time, going to a different environment, matches weren't on TV. I'm talking about a school environment, not being completely happy with that for certain reasons, and making a change, packing a bag, going overseas, having half a life away from family, fiance, all of these things. That's the pivotal moment. I think if you are able to believe in something and pack a bag and go, you much more than 50% of the way there. And these are really, really tough things to do in life.
Very difficult, man. Leaving your home, your comfort zone, your security, the way of life, as you said, to pack up a bag and take the leap of faith and go into the abyss of the unknown, land in Israel with your bag in hand and going, where the fuck am I going? Right. So it's nerve wracking, but I think that's the difference between someone like you who is and why you are the head coach. That's the difference between why you are driving the success that you are is that mindset, that willingness to take the leap of faith, the willingness to believe, the willingness to work, the willingness to sort of keep going forward. And I think a lot of cases, particularly in the times that we're living in, and I don't want to get into the big sort of COVID conversation, but we're living in fucking uncertain times right now. And we are looking towards our coaches and our leaders to provide that certainty, that direction, that safe zone. So, we could maybe get into this a little later, but just before we break, let's go to this question. How much do you think you lead your players on and off the field? Is it equal? Do you put as like, are you a leader in their life and their field, or how do you separate that?
I would say that definitely off the field is much, much more than on the field. If you think about all the preparation that goes into, let's say, running a race, sport is sport, creating a team culture. Your match is only, when I say only, it feels like a lifetime, but your match is only 80 minutes. But you're practicing every single day, or you're spending an entire season to play. I mean, in Israel, for an example, we have 4 test matches a year currently. As we climb world rankings, hopefully we'll get more. But 4 test matches a year, and we train all year round for those 4 test matches. Or from a 7-a-side concept where we're trying to become relevant and maybe qualify for an Olympic Games one day, that type of thing. We have 2 tournaments in an entire year. We training all year round for those 2 moments. So off the field it's sort of an analogy of sport and life and coaching, but off the field, much, much more. Leadership is all, let's say, in the boardroom. Action time is action time. That's when you have to perform, but you're kind of not leading during that time. You're just steering. You're just allowing everyone to be at their full potential, but creating that potential is way more off the field. Just one more thing regarding that, which I think is very important. Definitely from my perspective, coaching style, you have a person and then you have a player, and the one doesn't work without the other. You cannot get someone to play if you're only concentrating on coaching their skill or their performance as a rugby player, because there's a person behind that drives the player. So you have to acknowledge the person behind the player, otherwise you can forget about it as a team coach.
So I want to ask this later, but I'm going to ask it now, which is, so what is your team culture? And the second question to that, just to slip it in, is, can you also tell us a little bit about your training schedule or the training regimen that you put your team through? So culture first, what's your culture like? And then what's training like?
Okay, so culture is, I think it comes from my background. And I also think it comes from, I haven't always had the best teams. And sort of getting those teams to never die, never give up. The culture is never give up. That's the culture for sure. The training regimen is very much conditioning based, and it is coaching style. You have my background is strength and conditioning, so I really implemented it, and it's something that works in a physical game like rugby. But I think in any sport, you need to acknowledge the physical side of it. So in any given training session, there will always be this huge physical component that's attached to it. It'll always be competitive. There'll always be a winner or a loser in every drill that you're doing. So it does get a bit frustrating for some of the players, because they're kind of always being brought to the brink in everything that they're doing. But then again, it sort of all sort of comes together when you're standing and having a chat about how you won a game. So
that's it, man. Navy SEALs, right?
Yeah.
Build that resilience. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to hear from our sponsor, and we're going to come back and we're going to pick up where we left off. Okay, just before we jump into the next segment, we're going to take a quick little audio break, and we're going to hear from our sponsor, the Better Human Program. The Better Human Program is a 10-week program that equips you with the tools to achieve success in every interaction with other humans. Learn assertiveness, effective communication, interpersonal skills, and take control of your life with the Better Human Program. Check out the link below for all the description information. All right, welcome on back. We are here chatting with Kevin around leadership and coaching, and also what it's like to sort of move people and build a successful sports team, a professional rugby team. So we just left off the last conversation, or the section before, where we were talking about the physical conditioning that you put people through in regard to the training and stuff like that. But I'd like to spend some time talking about the people side of things, right? So building the physicality is one aspect of it, the strength and the conditioning of the body. But can we talk a little bit about what you do to, do the strengthening and the conditioning of the soul, of the emotion, of the human, of the person?
Sure. I think we, as coaches, we get tired of our own voice. We get tired of our own voice. So can you imagine what the team feels like hearing you all the time? And I really try and bring other leaders into a team environment. I'm not shy to bring someone that has had this insurmountable problem to overcome that competition that we're speaking about, the Varsity Cup, where I had the worst team, or we were supposed to come second last or last, and we ended up this fantastic win in the end and trophy. We had someone that was part of our team called Kaylee Mycroft, and she's got cerebral palsy. She put herself through university. I think she's doing a master's now. We made her part of our team. She was our motivation. And it's those types of things. When you think it's really, really tough to win a rugby match, and then you think about every day for Kaylee, you think about those dark places when she's writing exams using her knuckles to type on her computer or whatever it is she's using to pass and get degrees. And as students, guys were complaining that their workload is too high. So it kind of just brings that emotional side and that attachment to really going out and playing for something greater than just the result. And I think that's the biggest thing. You've got all these individuals that make up the team. You acknowledge them as people, but at the same time, you make them as a unit realize, hang on, we are playing to win a game. We want to win this game so we can win the next game and then make a semi-final and then a final. But what about if we're playing for something else? What about if we're playing for a theme? What about if our theme for this week happens to be friendship? And friendship means liking people and trusting people. So you can't be somebody's friend by just liking them, and you can't be somebody's friend by just trusting them and not liking them. Now, all of a sudden, at the end of the match, you lose the match, but you think, did we honor our theme? And if we honored our theme, we actually win it. So that's kind of the way you draw out this better people. Everyone always says, let's build a culture of better people. The New Zealand rugby team talk about sweeping the shed, cleaning up after yourselves, no matter how good you are. But I think it's easy to say it, but you actually have to be it. And I don't think teams can win major competitions if they don't have that polish.
So I love what you just said, which is, again, back to mindsets and back to looking after the people. I also agree that culture is an outcome. It's an outcome of actions and behaviors. I'll just paraphrase, right? A lot of people think they can just create culture by doing these two things. It's, as you said, it's hard to live this. It's hard to create that shared purpose. And I was recently doing a session. We got into the conversation, which is around successful teams and people that are, call it, top talent, or they are like the high performers within the group. And there were some common themes that said, okay, so these people are high performers for all these reasons, but they become even more high performers when a couple other things are added to the mix. Connection, deeper connections, which is what you're talking about, friendship and trust, right? And the second thing was a shared purpose. Simon Sinek talks about the golden circle of why. We talk about sort of knowing your internal why. Like, why do we get out of bed? Why do we compete? There's got to be something bigger than the trophy or the actual point on the board. It has everything to do with how we played, how we showed up, the community. So, just interesting on that note, what do you do outside of the rugby club with the team? Do you guys do community exercises? Do you contribute in things like volunteering? What do you do with the team?
I definitely push that. It's the whole the better people vibe. It's something you have to do, not just something you have to say. It does get difficult if you don't have a professional team that's at your disposal all the time. Because if your team is at your disposal all the time, then you're able to really engage with these special things. So that's a must. I'm not sure the socializing part with your team. I'm not saying it's a no-no, but there is a difference between a coach and a player. And I think you have to be viewed in that regard, but at the same time, they also have to see that you're human. So I think being vulnerable in front of your team is not a sin. showing your team that you can be very passionate, that you can get angry, that you can say sorry, that you can make a mistake as a leader, as a coach. I think it actually gains respect. But also you can't pretend. It has to be part of your personality. Sometimes I think people, coaches, leaders will try and read a book and then try to be like that person, or say, hang on, this guy won a competition, I'm going to follow this principle. But if it doesn't suit your personality, it's not going to work for you. And that's the beauty of leadership. And I think the beauty of sport is that you're able to listen to all these things, grow, learn, and then apply them to exactly who you are, make a few mistakes, and hopefully you still get another game next weekend. And I think that's the key to really connecting to these special little things.
Everything I heard you say was describing being authentic, being real, being connected, I love the fact that you used the word vulnerable. It's, if for the people on the audio who don't get to see Kevin, if you see this guy, he's built like a truck. So, for him and this image to be talking about vulnerability and the importance of that in leadership and communication and coaching, is awesome, because again, we talk a lot about this with corporate leadership, but it just, you just went and proved the fact that this has everything to do with just leading people, right? Awesome. Okay, Kevin, let's get into some more deep dive stuff. Let's go for the first one. What is the common myth about your profession or field that you want to debunk?
In particular, being a head coach is lonely. It's lonely because when you win, when your team wins, first of all, you never win, your team wins, and your team never loses because the coach loses. In the end, coaching is the ultimate individual team sport because you're an individual up against another individual. So the glamorous part is everyone kind of wants to talk to the captain, talk to the coach, talk to, interview the coach. But in the end, you either winning or losing, and this is how you live your life. It's a toss of a coin. It's a 50-50. If you're a player, you can have a good game and your team can lose. So it's terrible to lose. It does feel a bit like death, but you can kind of feel good about your performance. As a coach, it doesn't matter if the fly half played well and the prop played badly. If you lose, it just feels like death and you're on your own. You cannot blame your assistant coaches. You cannot blame your kicker for missing a kick. In the end, it's on you. And that's the lonely part. And I think there's a bit of madness in a lot of coaches because you're living your life like that. It's a 50-50 every time you run out. So I think that's the myth. The myth is that everything's always great. Actually, thinking about it, I'm crazy about stats. I love stats. I record everything, every single game I've been involved in. I jot it down and I keep record of it. And to lose 100 times in 23 years, close to 100 times. You think about it, it's almost 2 years, a week. 2 years of weeks of losing, which feels like death. Mm-hmm. So there's the myth, and that's on a higher win percentage than 50-50.
Wow. All right, next question. What's the hardest part about being the head coach? I know you said it's lonely and it's losing feels like death, and we might have answered it, but
nobody likes criticism. You show me somebody that says, please criticize me. Please criticize the way my team played. Please criticize the fact that your traditionalist sees your shirt out because you get involved or your hair a mess or, you swore or something happened. Nobody likes it. And as the head coach, if you're going to react, and everyone has their breaking point, but if you're going to react all the time or make excuses for the criticism, it's going to be a really tough job for you because even when you win, you're going to get criticized. There's going to be someone that's going to think you could have played better. There's that famous, I love it, I think it's Theodore Roosevelt, I hope I'm right on that, but the quote about the critic. The critic is nothing. It's the person on the field. It's the one that's cut to pieces, that knows what it's like to win and lose and doesn't stand on the side and knows never knows the difference between winning and losing. But the reality is the head coach is going to get criticized even when you win. Yep. Why did you only win by 2 points?
It is your job to take those critical punches over and over and over again. And, just coming back to what you're talking about before, which is, coaches being is lonely. It's isolating in some regards. It's very true. The coach gets fired, the players get traded, right? And at the end of the day, it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure in two different ways. So I think you do need to be a special type of personality. On that note, what type of personality do you see succeeding in your role?
You take your heart and you stick it on the field, and it stays there. So a piece of you dies every time you leave, and you just have to have a big enough heart to be able to take your heart out again and stick it in the next place. To answer your question, a massive, massive, massive heart that you're prepared to put on the table and let people walk on. Because in the end, if you give everything, which is your heart, no one can. First of all, you can look yourself in the mirror, and second of all, no one can criticize you for not putting everything into what you're doing.
I'm a little stumped at the end of each of these moments, because like I'm taken back in a very positive way in what you're saying, and again, just to paraphrase, everything you're talking about being successful has everything to do with your emotional fortitude, your resilience, your mindset, your humility, your vulnerability, your willingness to serve, to give to other, to stretch yourself, to exhaust yourself emotionally and physically, all for the better of the other human being, man. And this is what this podcast is about, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about this stuff, which was, again, here's an example of us everyday individuals running around the world making such an impact, and that's what you're doing. Why do people fail in sport? Why would a coach fail? Why would a team member fail?
That's interesting. Very interesting. I think you fail when you give up. I don't think you fail until the time you say, I quit. I think it's impossible to fail by coming second or fail by coming third. And everyone always says, do your best. But then there's another part of it that the guy that comes second, it could be a millisecond away from the guy that comes first. The guy that comes first sort of runs through the tape and still has energy to do a victory lap. And the guy that comes second he's like despair. And it was just a millisecond. So I don't think you can fail. The only time you can fail is by getting up, stopping to get up and try again. There's an interesting, Michael Jordan says an interesting thing that I don't know the exact number, but he's been given 26 opportunities, maybe more, to have the winning shot, and he's missed. The best basketball player of all time, and he's missed it, and he's failed, and that's why he succeeds. So I think saying you're a failure, then you failed. Realizing you have to fail to succeed, then you succeed.
So let me ask you about quitting. Is it okay to quit, or when would it be okay to quit? And not quitting because you failed. Like, what if, like, how do you get to that stage where you can know the difference between I'm giving up right now versus, as Seth Godin describes in The Dip, this is strategically quitting?
I think everyone has quitted. There's no one that hasn't. Definitely. I'm not sure there's a right time to quit, but I think when all the wires aren't quite working and you're out of character, I think if you're out of character and you quit, sort of live to fight another day kind of vibe. I don't think it's ever okay to quit. I think you do an injustice to yourself, and obviously from a physical perspective, your body, you're going to have to stop. But I think you're referring to mentality. And right. I think the day you quit on yourself, from a mentality perspective, I think it's never okay to do that.
Right. It takes a certain type of mindset, a certain type of grit, a certain type of toughness, you would say, to keep driving like that. Out of how many people do you think actually carry that? Actually have that, like, I ain't fucking quitting?
I think not too many, which is why you get world champions, and which is why you get professionals, and most people are not world champions or professionals. Most people watch world champions and professionals and try and learn and take examples from them, and that's okay, because if you didn't have those people, you wouldn't have world champions. But most people give up too soon, and I'm not sure that I would prefer a world where people don't give up and people believe in dreaming and going out to reach for the stars. I would prefer that world, but I suppose thinking about it, you wouldn't have your champions if everybody just never gave up. You just have this giant slugfest of life. But then we'd all find a way to be better. So I suppose there's pros and cons in all of that.
Would you say your ultimate job is to make sure people don't quit?
I think it is your ultimate job as a leader and a coach, because most people quit at the first obstacle.
Yep.
And then another 50% quit at the second obstacle. And they could just be one step away from greatness or success, and they just give up and someone takes them over. Again, I think it was a 400-meter athlete said, to be the world, that everybody wants to be the best in the world, but it's quite an arrogant thing to be the best in the world, because it means you are the best in the world, which means you have to have a level of arrogance. But to be the best in the world at something means you also have to be humble enough to work at it every single day of your life. So you have to be arrogant and humble at the same time. And I think a lot of people want that easy success, especially talented sportsmen, leaders, business owners, coaches. Your talent can also be a curse, because you get things easy and then you don't know how to deal with that first speed bump. Whereas someone who's been grinding away, that speed bump is just normal for them. They just jump over it and move to the next one because they're expecting it. So.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, but before we get into the final section of the show, which is the most important section of the show, which is called the Better Human Takeaway, and this is Better Human Podcast, we're going to hear from a quick sponsor, and we'll come on back. Okay, just before we jump into the next segment, we're going to take a quick little audio break, and we're going to hear from our sponsor, the Better Human Program. The Better Human Program is a 10-week program that equips you with the tools to achieve success in every interaction with other humans. Learn assertiveness, effective communication, interpersonal skills, and take control of your life with the Better Human Program. Check out the link below for all the description information. All right, welcome on back. We're on the final piece of the show. The objective of this section is to give expert advice and to find out a little more about what we can do moving forward. So we're going to try to pick your brain a little more, Kevin, here. I'm going to try to get some of those nuggets out. So we like to start the last section with this question, which is, what does the word better human mean to you, and how do we all achieve this?
It's understanding. There's a word called empathy. It's actually feeling what someone else is feeling. I don't think anyone can really know what someone else is feeling, but I don't think we have excuses to not try and understand how someone is the way that they are. Often, especially as a coach, we all want to coach those players that are easy to coach, those ones that listen to everything that you say, except the complex guys are the guys that are going to win you those big games, and your ability to understand them, what makes them tick. They're products of their environment, they're products of their upbringing. When you really get stuck in and you try and understand them, you develop a higher quality person. But not only that, you become a higher quality person. So I think that's the key to really making a difference to someone else. If you can make a difference to someone else, you most certainly can make a difference to yourself.
Yeah. So how hard is it for you, just on that note, to, let's say, because we see this happen in business and families as well, we make the joke about in-laws, where you inherit these people, right? And you inherit them from other bosses, other coaches, other families. And, and in some cases they're difficult, right? They're difficult individuals. It's difficult to connect. So how do you, how do you undo some of the bad lessons that some of these people have had along the way?
I think it's trust and experience. You can't get experience without getting experience. And the reason that someone is a coach and someone is a player, because hopefully the coach is experienced enough to be able to coach and mentor the player and the team to a better place. Mm-hmm. So as soon as the player starts trusting that, you will find that they respond, because everyone wants to be better, even the most difficult person in the world. Everyone wants to play a better game, kick a ball better, pass a ball better, all of these things. Everybody does. If you had to ask someone, do you want to be a better person or a worse person? They're not going to say, I'd much rather be a worse person. So if they start trusting you to lead them and coach them and mentor them, slowly but surely, let's call it the bad habits of failure, being depressed, being sad about what you're doing. I mean, how can you be sad to practice and play rugby? It's just crazy. It's the best thing in the world. So if you carry that on your sleeve and like I said, you put your heart on the table, it's very, very difficult for the most complex player, let's say the most complex person that happens to be playing on your team, to not develop a trust with you as their coach. Of course, you have conflict, and of course, not everything always works out as perfectly as I'm describing to you now. But in the end, if you follow those principles, you will succeed in getting through to your players more than fail.
Very cool. Who was the worst coach you've ever had?
I can't mention names, but I think a lot of kids, especially in the South African context, may turn around and say it's some of their teachers that they had. Fortunately, in my view, professionals are coming into schooling systems especially in South Africa, where there's a professional rugby coach that is in charge of the rugby program, who is not necessarily a teacher that teaches science or geography or mathematics in the classroom, and is kind of doing it either because they have to or doesn't realize that lateral thinking, actually there's no right or wrong answer on a sports field, and certainly they're not sort of going towards what makes this kid tick as a human being, as a person. So my worst coaches along the way, when I was playing, they taught me a lot about how not to coach. So some of the school coaches that I had, but then again, some of them were really, really great and really special people that changed my life.
What are some resources that people can take advantage of, that you've taken advantage of for your own learning, your own growth?
There's only so many rugby games you can watch. There's only so many practices you can go to as a coach or as a player. There's only so many kicks you can practice. You got to read. You got to learn about what other people are doing in things that are very, very different to your sport or your business. Or you can't keep, if you're an accountant, you can't keep learning about being a better accountant. You actually need to learn about what makes a very talented musician so talented, and then equate it back to your particular sphere. And I really believe in that. I'm a bit left of center in that approach. If there's something that's really difficult, I want to learn how can I become adequate at it, because if I can become adequate at something that I could never do before, I can become really brilliant at something I've always been able to do.
At the end of each episode, we ask our guests for a better human takeaway, a 1 or 2 line piece of advice, a sort of a big learning for today's discussion. What's your better human takeaway for our audience? What should the audience, leave this conversation with?
It's a little bit fairy tale-y, but as I said, left of center. It's long live the dreamer. I love the dreamer. I think the world needs more dreamers. I think you asked the question about quitting, and I said it's never okay to quit, and give a tough sort of coach answer for you. But good players and good coaches, they don't lose. They just run out of time. And I think believe in a few things. Believe that good will always win over evil. And if you're not getting your own way, it's just because it's not finished yet. The game is still on, even if you've lost this particular thing or some deal didn't work. So if you're good will always win over evil. True love never dies. It's if you really love something, it'll never ever die. And then, of course, always believe in magic. Just believe that special things can happen, and believe that there's magic out there, and you'll find it.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. All right, Kevin, where can the listeners find you? Where can we look you up? Where can we get in contact with you? Plug the rugby association, the team. You tell us where we can find you.
Very easy. Sort of simple, but old guy, but not so old. I like my Facebook and I like my Instagram. I'm fairly active on it. You just punch in my name, you'll find me there. And you click. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course on LinkedIn, just my name, Kevin Musikanth. Search it, it'll come up.
Amazing. So we'll also put all that in the show notes and the footnotes. And obviously when we post this out, we'll make sure you're all tagged to it. Kevin, you are the definition of a better human. You are the definition of a better leader, a better coach. You represent, you are doing amazing things. You are building a community. You're building a team. You're building a sport. You're contributing to people's growth, to their mindset, to their well-being, their emotional fortitude. Thank you so much for being here. I really, really, really appreciate it. I know the audience and the listeners will as well. And we just might have to have you come back once you've won that World Cup. And at this point, we'll have a much bigger audience to listen to as well. So with that being said, if you like today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to click that like button and don't forget to share. And we will see you next time. Hey, I'm Greg Witz. Thanks so much for coming and checking out the video. If you like that video, you're going to love the next one. So I'd highly suggest that you click this video over here. And don't forget to subscribe and share.